In the world of Westeros, true power is measured by intelligence, ruthlessness, political cunning, and the ability to survive in a game where one wrong move does not cost you a job or a reputation. It costs you your head. From a brilliant military mind who lost everything despite being right, to the man who did not just play the Game of Thrones, but was the game itself. Here is every level of intelligence, and Game of Thrones ranked from the very bottom. At the absolute bottom of the intelligence hierarchy sits Stannis Baratheon. And before anyone objects, understand that this is not a judgment of his military mind, which was genuinely formidable. Stannis held Storm's End through a siege that would have broken lesser men. He understood battlefield logistics, troop positioning, and the mechanics of warfare better than almost any commander in the series. He also happened to be right about almost everything politically. The Iron Throne was legally his, and that the Lannisters had betrayed the realm. He saw the threat of the White Walkers before any other king took it seriously, and yet he lost everything: his army, his daughter, his life. The reason Stannis sits at the bottom, it is because he had a near total inability to understand the human element of power. He could not inspire loyalty in people who were not already bound to him by duty. He treated the pursuit of kingship like a mathematical equation, where if the variables were correct, the answer was guaranteed. But power in Westeros was never mathematics. It was theater, and Stannis refused to perform. He expected men to follow him because he was right. Men do not follow leaders because they are right. They follow leaders who make them feel something. Stannis made people feel nothing except vaguely uncomfortable. His relationship with Melisandre represents his greatest strategic failure. He was a man of cold logic and rigid principle who handed the wheel to a woman operating entirely on faith and visions. The moment he allowed her influence to override his own judgment, particularly in the burning of his daughter Shireen, he abandoned the one quality that made him formidable. He had traded his only real weapon, his unflinching rational mind, for a religion that gave him nothing in return, brilliant in a narrow lane, catastrophically blind outside of it. Moving up slightly, we find Robb Stark, a figure who represents something almost more tragic than incompetence, which is squandered genius. On a battlefield, Robb Stark was extraordinary. He never lost a single military engagement. He captured Jaime Lannister, the most feared fighter in the Seven Kingdoms, through a tactical feint so precise that even Tywin Lannister was forced to respect it. His instincts in open warfare were as sharp as anyone in the series, but warfare and politics are entirely different games, and Robb only ever mastered one of them. His mistakes do not require much excavation. He married Talisa out of love and honor, destroying his alliance with House Frey over a broken betrothal promise that Walder Frey had been waiting to punish someone for his entire life. He executed Lord Karstark for killing Lannister prisoners, which was the honorable and technically correct decision, but it fractured his army and forced him to return to the very man he had just insulted. He trusted people he should not have trusted. He underestimated everyone around him who were secretly running their own calculations beneath a surface of loyalty. Robb's core problem was inherited from his father. He believed that honor was a strategy. In Westeros, honor is not a strategy. It is a luxury that only the powerful can occasionally afford, and even then, only briefly. Robb had the ruthlessness of a battlefield commander, but never translated it into the throne room. He fought like a king and governed like a boy who expected the world to reward him for doing the right thing. The world did not reward him. The world sent him to the Red Wedding. In the middle of this hierarchy sits Olenna Tyrell, and she sits there by choice. The Queen of Thorns is one of the most lethally intelligent operators in the entire series, and her most effective weapon was the fact that almost no one took her seriously. She was an old woman with a sharp tongue who seemed to spend most of her time insulting people at dinner tables. That presentation was not accidental. It was armor. Olenna understood something that most players in this game never grasped. The best political move is the one that nobody sees coming from you. She orchestrated the poisoning of Joffrey Baratheon at his own wedding, one of the most heavily attended and surveilled events in King's Landing. And for the majority of the series, not a single person suspected her. She sat at the table as a grieving ally while the Lannisters tore themselves apart trying to pin the murder on Tyrion. She had removed the single most dangerous and unpredictable piece on the board and walked away without a scratch. Her intelligence is of of the practical, outcome-driven variety. She does not deal in ideology or grand historical vision. She deals in results. What does House Tyrell need? Safety, influence, and a Tyrell close enough to the throne to matter. Every decision she makes flows directly from that calculation. Marjorie's marriage, the alliance with the Lannisters, the move to King's Landing, all of it is Olenna's strategy wearing a younger and more charming face. Where she falls short of the levels above her is in scope. Olenna plays an exceptional regional game. Her strategies are reactive and protective rather than expansive. She responds to power and neutralizes threats, but she does not reshape the board itself. She is a brilliant defensive player in a game that ultimately rewards those who go on offense. At level 4, we find Varys, and Varys is genuinely one of the most difficult figures in this entire universe to place, because his greatest strategic tool is that nobody ever fully knows what he wants. That uncertainty is not a weakness. It is the foundation of his power. You cannot outmaneuver someone whose endgame you cannot read. His network of informants, the little birds, is the most comprehensive intelligence that even kings cannot seem to grasp. He receives information about plots before those plots are halfway formed. In a world where knowledge is the ultimate currency, Varys is consistently the wealthiest person in any room he enters. What separates Varys from the purely self-interested players at other levels is his stated motivation, the realm. He consistently acts as though the stability and well-being of ordinary people matters more than which particular family controls the throne. Whether you trust that motivation or not is part of what makes him endlessly fascinating to watch. Now here is where it gets important for those who only know the show. In the books, Varys is operating on a level that the show never fully communicated. In George R.R. Martin's novels, Varys has spent decades secretly supporting a Targaryen claimant named Young Griff, a character who does not exist anywhere in the television series. This Aegon was raised in secret, trained specifically to be a just and capable ruler, and represents the culmination of a plan Varys has been executing quietly for the better part of 20 years. The show cut this entirely, which means show viewers watched Varys and saw a clever spy master who switches sides based on whoever seems most likely to govern well. Book readers watched Varys and saw a man who has been playing a single decades-long game from the very beginning, one that required the fall of multiple regimes before it could reach its conclusion. Those are two completely different characters sharing the same face. The book version belongs in a higher conversation. The show version, while compelling, represents only a fraction of what was actually on the page. At level 5, we find Tyrion Lannister. This is the placement that will frustrate the most people, because Tyrion is the character that most viewers would instinctively rank at the top of any intelligence list. That instinct is not wrong. Tyrion is extraordinary. His defense of King's Landing at the Battle of the Blackwater was one of the most impressive combined military and logistical performances in the series. He reads people with an accuracy that borders on uncomfortable. He understands power structures intuitively and navigates hostile political environments, specifically a court that despises him, with a skill that borders on supernatural. But Tyrion has two weaknesses that surface at the worst possible moments and cost him repeatedly. The first is his relationship with wine and pleasure, which clouds his judgment during periods when clarity is most essential. The second, and significantly more damaging, is that Tyrion desperately wants to be loved. For all his surface level cynicism, he craves approval, particularly from his father, and that need is a vulnerability that his enemies have always known how to find. Now, for those who only know the show, the book version of Tyrion after the events of season 4 is a substantially darker and more dangerous figure. After killing his father and fleeing across the narrow sea, book Tyrion does not transition smoothly into a wise advisor offering measured counsel to a powerful queen. He goes through a period of genuine psychological dissolution driven by rage, grief, and a consuming hatred for his family, particularly Cersei. He is angrier, more reckless, more willing to burn things down because he has decided he has very little left to protect. The show softened this arc considerably and turned him into a passive, increasingly ineffective advisor figure who seemed to lose his edge the moment he left Westeros. The man who outmaneuvered Cersei managed to survive a court that wanted him dead, purely on wit and political instinct. That version of Tyrion is one of the sharpest minds in the story. The later show version is living on reputation, with the acknowledgement that his ceiling, particularly in the books, may not yet be fully visible. At level 6 sits Petyr Baelish, and this entry requires more time than any other on this list because no character was more dramatically diminished by the journey from page to screen than Littlefinger. In the show, Baelish is a genuinely menacing schemer who manipulates his way through the first several seasons with considerable effectiveness before being outwitted by Sansa and Arya in season 7 and executed in a scene that totally felt inconsistent with everything established about him. Show Littlefinger is a good villain. He is interesting, he is dangerous in specific moments, and Aidan Gillen plays the role with a slimy magnetism that works well on screen. But Show Littlefinger is not the Littlefinger of the books, not even close. For viewers who have only watched the series, here is what was lost in translation. In George R.R. Martin's novels, Petyr Baelish is operating on a scale and with a patience that the television version never communicated. He was born with nothing, no significant land, no army, no family name that carried any weight in Westerosi politics. He was a minor lord of a tiny holding called the Fingers, which is where his nickname originates, and he arrived at the Eyrie as a ward of House Tully with essentially no advantages except his own mind. From that starting point, he rose to become one of the most powerful individuals in the Seven Kingdoms. He restructured the entire financial system of the Iron Throne as master of coin deliberately to create a debt crisis that destabilized the Lannister regime's grip on power. He did not just scheme around the edges of the story. He engineered the inciting incident of the entire plot. It was Littlefinger who arranged the murder of Jon Arryn, the Hand of the King, whose death set everything that followed into motion. Without Littlefinger's manipulation of Lysa Tully into poisoning her own husband and then falsely blaming the Lannisters in a letter to Catelyn, none of the events of Game of Thrones happen the way they happen. He did not just participate in the story, he started it. In the books, at the point where Martin's writing currently stands, Littlefinger controls the Vale of Arryn through his influence over the young and impressionable Lord Robin. He has significant reach into the Riverlands. He is maneuvering Sansa, who is disguised as his illegitimate daughter, into a position that he intends to use to claim legitimacy in both the Vale and eventually the North. He is not just accumulating power, he is building a dynasty from a foundation of nothing, using intelligence, patience, and an almost architectural understanding of how influence actually works in this world. The show version makes his obsession with Sansa feel creepy and slightly pathetic. The books frame it differently. His obsession began with Catelyn Tully, whom he loved as a young man and who chose someone else. That wound never healed. What he feels for Sansa, who resembles her mother, is genuinely complicated in ways the show never had the space or perhaps the inclination to explore. But crucially, the book version uses that emotional core strategically as well. He is teaching Sansa the game. He is grooming her not just in the disturbing surface sense that the show implied, but as a political protege, someone through whom he can act and who can provide him a path to the kind of legacy and legitimacy that a man of his birth could never claim directly. His potential undoing in the books is that same emotional core. In an otherwise cold and calculating machine, the Catelyn fixation is the one genuine human vulnerability, the crack in the architecture. Whether that crack eventually brings the whole structure down is a question the books have not yet answered. Show Littlefinger was a solid villain who was given an exit that did not fit the character. Book Littlefinger is one of the most terrifyingly patient and architecturally sophisticated political minds in modern fiction. If you only watch the show, you are given a sketch of a character who is genuinely incredible. And at level 7 sits Tywin Lannister, and everything else in this video has been building toward this. Tywin Lannister is the standard against which every other strategist in Westeros should be measured, and almost all of them fall short in ways that feel obvious the moment you make the comparison. He did not simply play the Game of Thrones, he understood it at a structural level that nobody else in the series, on page or on screen, fully matched or surpassed. Begin with what Tywin actually built. House Lannister's dominance at the opening of the series did not emerge emerge from luck or inheritance alone. Tywin spent decades constructing it deliberately, through calculated marriages, through economic leverage, through military force deployed at precisely calibrated moments, and through a reputation for absolute ruthlessness that he established early and maintained without exception. The Reigns of Castamere is not simply a song that playing musicians perform at weddings. It is a message that Tywin Lannister sent to every lord in Westeros when he was still a young man. A message that continued echoing through the political landscape of the Seven Kingdoms for a generation afterward. His House Rain defied him. House Rain no longer exists. The song exists so that everyone who hears it remembers why. His particular genius is the genius of systems rather than individual moves. Tywin did not merely win battles or isolated political confrontations. He constructed situations in which the structural odds were always by design tilted in his favor before the first piece moved. The Red Wedding is the definitive example of this and the clearest illustration of what separates level 7, thinking from everything below it. Robb Stark had defeated Tywin on every single battlefield they contested. Tywin could not beat him militarily, so Tywin changed the battlefield entirely. He set aside personal pride, made peace with a man he almost certainly found contemptible in Walder Frey, brought the Boltons into an arrangement that served their ambitions, and used those alliances to destroy his most dangerous enemy without committing a single Lannister soldier to open combat. That is a comprehensive mastery of what winning actually requires, which is not necessarily defeating your enemy on the terms they have chosen, but redefining the terms entirely until the confrontation happens on ground that only favors you. Tywin also understood legacy in a way that no other character in the series genuinely matched. He was not fighting for himself, and his actions confirmed it consistently. He was fighting for a dynasty that would outlast him by centuries if he built it correctly. Every decision he made, including his treatment of his children, was filtered through the question of what House Lannister would look like in 100 years. That is both his greatest strength and arguably the source of his greatest blind spot, because Tywin's one true failure was Tyrion. He could not see past his own contempt for his youngest son long enough to recognize that Tyrion was the most Lannister of all his children, the one who had actually inherited his father's mind. That contempt was not strategic, it was personal, it was human, and it is what got him killed, sitting on a privy by the son he could never bring himself to value. The show and the books are essentially aligned on Tywin. Charles Dance's portrayal is one of the most faithful book-to-screen translations in the series. The coldness, the intelligence, the total absence of warmth that is somehow not villainous, but simply managerial. It's all there. If anything, the show made Tywin slightly more human in his scenes with Arya, which the books wouldn't have allowed. But the core is intact. He is level 7, not because he is perfect, but because no one else in Westeros ever came as close to bending the entire game to their will. He didn't play the Game of Thrones. For 30 years, he molded the Game of Thrones by his hands.